Grace and peace to you. Welcome to Sabbath School Study Group. My name is Chris Bailey, and you're joining us this week for a continuation of our new theme we're looking at for the next 3 months, preparation for the end times. And we're turning now to a prophetic book. There are two main prophetic books in the Bible. One's Daniel, the other's Revelation, and we'll get to those both. But today and this week, we're going to focus on the story of Daniel and the end time. Because when you look at Daniel chapter 2, one of the things that should stand out even beyond the numerical chronological prophecies, it's the humility of Daniel. This is the atmosphere that allowed for him to be honored with this revelation and understanding that we still get hope from today. So that's why we want to take a look behind the scenes, to look at the characters and the attitudes and spirituality of the people involved in these stories. The first one being Daniel. And so when we go to verse 47 of Daniel 2, we find our verse for the week. The king answered and said unto Daniel, Of a truth it is, that your God is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldest reveal this secret. Lord, reveal to us now the attitude that Daniel had so that it can become our testimony today. In Jesus' name, amen. As important as it is to know the timeline behind the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had and that Daniel interpreted, we see this image that he saw with a head of gold. That head of gold symbolized the kingdom of Babylon. But then below that, you see the image took on silver. And this silver symbolized the kingdom or the empire of the Medes and the Persians. Below that silver, you have the brass and those thighs of brass. They symbolize the empire of Greece. And then down below on the legs of solid iron, you see that's the empire of Rome. And then you see those legs would break off into feet that were combination of iron and clay, a mixture of Rome, but a little bit of clay. And that made them brittle and unstable. And eventually the whole thing was torn down by a rock from heaven that filled the whole earth. This was a symbol of the times that would pass between Babylon and to the very end of time. And these kingdoms all also shared a common thing in that they all occupied the territory of the promised land. And so these prophecies are powerful because they let us know that when God says something before it happened, that truly he's greater than what has happened. That's the beautiful gift that prophecy gives us. But also we see in this story people, ordinary people, and one of them was Daniel. And in the life of Daniel, where he was able to get this great gift, both he and his comrades, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you realize that humility precedes honor. We see them after. We revere and we really we are amazed at what they did. But more importantly, sometimes we have to see how they did that. And it was simply Daniel's attitude. And we know he had this attitude by how he was responding to the king as he was revealing this secret dream. Because Daniel answered in the presence of the king. He still has his whereabouts. He has this consciousness where he's totally confident in the presence of the emperor of Babylon because he was able to be humble in the presence of the King of Kings. In fact, the secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king. This is a testimony even against himself. He was one of these wise men. He was saying, look, this is not something that I did or we did. This did not come to me because of how I eat. Now, we know his story from chapter 1, and we see his faithfulness as we're going to look on later this week. But this didn't happen by virtue of that. In fact, he just says, there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. This is the language of someone with a humble heart. He goes on to say, verse 29, As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind. I serve the Lord who reads minds. You may read edicts, you may read laws, but my God reads minds and hearts. And he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. So he's come to you to let you know what he is going to do. This is totally counter to the way Nebuchadnezzar thinks. From birth, he's been told that the world revolves around what you want to do. But now here comes God invading the bedroom of his mind and telling him, this is what you're going to do. This is what is going to happen. Not because he's making it, but because I know what's going to be. And so here we see in verse 30, As for me, Daniel testifies just to humility again. This secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. The Lord has done this from the goodness of his heart, not the goodness of my own. Because Daniel approached him with a humble heart, because Daniel had that same spirit that Christ would have when he would walk this earth, he was able to be close enough to the Father that the Father would reveal secrets to him. This is what Jesus taught us, and this is what Daniel laid out in his life to show us. To get close to God, we got to get away from ourselves. And when Daniel did this, when he got away from himself and he got close to the Lord, what starts to happen now is that you see he has an attitude that becomes conducive, not just conducive to his spirituality. He's not just doing this to get something, but he didn't just love him, but he liked him. See, there are 2,600 years between Daniel chapter 2 and today, but 0 years between what pleases the Father. There was something that the Lord liked about Daniel. He didn't just love, and he loves all of us, but he liked Daniel. Look at what he says in verse 40 of Daniel 2. When he's giving the dream, and he's in verse 41 and 42, whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, part of the potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Did that happen? Yes. So we see that this 2,600 year space, it hasn't changed the accuracy. In fact, the toes of the feet were part iron, part clay. So the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. This is speaking of the way that Rome was eventually divided into 10 kingdoms. And those 10 kingdoms of Rome yesterday are the continent and the countries of Europe today. Are they partly strong and partly broken? Yes. Are they united? Yes, they're united in the European Union. But is that union solid? Absolutely not. In fact, the UK is in the middle of a Brexit, Britain leaving or exiting that union. So it's partly strong, partly broken. So the vision is prophetically accurate. And the same attitude that Daniel had that God liked is the same he likes today. We see it in verse 19 when Daniel says, then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. So there's this then is like a shifting of a gear. What was happening before the then? What moved God to reveal the secret? Here's the attitude that the Lord loves and likes. Verse 17, Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, who we normally call the 3 Hebrew boys. Here are their Hebrew names. He got together with his friends because he had no wife. He was a eunuch. He was unable to reproduce family. He was unable to marry. And so the closest that he had, his bosom buddies, was not a wife, but it was his friends, his fellow captives. And they got together. And when 2 or 3 gathered together, Jesus was in the midst, that they would desire the mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret. They knew the Lord knew. They didn't doubt that it came from the Lord. What they were wondering is, would he have mercy on us and let us know what he has shown? They didn't say, well, we're the 3 Hebrew boys. He didn't say, well, I'm Daniel. They didn't appeal to any of that. They appealed to the very same thing you and I can appeal to today, and that is the mercy and the grace of God. God's mercy to not give us what we deserve, and then God's grace to give us what we don't deserve. This is right in line with Hebrews 4. They went boldly and found both grace and mercy, Daniel and his fellows, that they would not die. They didn't want to die. They were human just like you and me. But through Jesus, they were holy like we can be. Because when you see that they were able to connect with heaven, it was by virtue of a relationship. They were in love with the Lord, and he loved them back and had mercy on them and did for them what they could not do for themselves. So with this attitude of humility that they had, and with this like and love that God had for that attitude, it sums up this way: deep revelation pours into deep hearts. This wasn't given to them because of their religion. This was given to them because of their relationship. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 22, he revealeth the deep and secret things. This is again, Daniel still testifying, still praising the Lord. No credit to himself. He's not pointing to his resume. He's not talking about who he knows. He's not talking about what he's done. He is pointing only to the goodness of God. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. Oh, I like that. He knows what's going on in the dark, but he lives in the light. That is amazing. He says in verse 23, I thank thee, I praise thee. See, remember the parable, not the parable, but the story of the 10 lepers? How many of them came back? One out of 10. That means that 10% of most people, of the 100% that the Lord blesses, will say thank you. Daniel was a 10%er. He says, I thank thee and I praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who has given me wisdom and might. He testifies, you have given me this wisdom, and you have made known to me now what we desired of thee. For thou hast now made known to us the king's matter. Daniel didn't get it twisted. He didn't get lost and deluded and start thinking, this is my wisdom. He simply said, no, this is God's answer to my prayer. When we look at our blessings, when we look at our lives this way, we're able to see Daniel, he checked in and he understood deep calleth unto deep. The Lord was able to give this depth of revelation because of the depth of his relationship to Daniel. At the noise of thy waterspouts, all thy waves and thy billows are gone over me. This has one connotation as you look in Psalm 42. But in another way, you can look at Daniel as being someone who has been enveloped. He's consumed. He's sold out to the Lord. And he's so deep in him that in his deepness, in the depth of his relationship, he's able to behold deep things out of the mind of God. This is not esoteric. This is not a pursuit for someone to say, well, I have to then do A, B, C in order to be initiated or somehow found worthy to get into this closeness with God. No, Daniel was simply someone who did not resist the appeals of God. He is calling and knocking, Revelation 3 says, on every single heart. But Daniel didn't just open up the front door. Daniel opened up the bedroom. Daniel opened up the bathroom. Daniel opened up the kitchen. He opened up the windows, and he was so full of the Spirit of God, like the 3 others, that the Lord was able to tell him deep things because that's where Daniel was. He was deep into Jesus, not deep into himself. Remember, the sooner we get away from ourselves, the sooner we can get to God. What God? Well, this one. The one where the king answered says to Daniel, of a truth it is, that your God is a God of gods and a Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret, because he loves you, Daniel. And guess who else he loves? He loves Nebuchadnezzar. He loved Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael. He even loves me and you in the same way. So if Daniel was able to have this revelation because of his relationship, what's stopping you today from getting away from yourself and into this relationship? If you were blessed by this video, praise Jesus. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe. There is much more to see and learn on our website at CHANGEministry.org. If you feel impressed, we would really appreciate any gift that you can give.